You probably imagine caveman life like this: a tough, muscular man with a spear, dragging a helpless woman by the hair into a dark cave. That image is everywhere, in movies, in cartoons, even in school textbooks. But here's the twist. It's completely wrong. The truth is far less glamorous and far more fascinating. Caveman women were not weak, passive, or lazy. In fact, they were the engines that kept their families, their groups, and honestly, the whole human species alive. What they did every single day wasn't just chores, it was survival work. So today, let's follow a prehistoric woman through an ordinary day. Let's see what she actually did all day from sunrise to sunset. Some of it may seem boring compared to spear hunting mammoths, but without these routines, our ancestors wouldn't have lasted a single winter. And by the end of this story, you'll realize something shocking. The boring life of caveman women was anything but boring. It was the real backbone of human survival. The sun rises slowly over the horizon. The air is cool, the grass wet with morning dew. Inside a rock shelter, a woman stirs awake. She isn't thinking about fashion, social media, or even what she'll wear today. Her first thought is simple: keep the fire alive. For caveman women, mornings started with responsibility. The fire had to be protected through the night, was their lifeline. Without fire, there was no warmth, no cooked food, and no safety from predators. So before anything else, she checks the glowing embers, gently feeding them dry grass and sticks until flames rise again. It looks routine, almost boring, but this small act kept her family alive. Next comes food. There's no fridge to open, no quick breakfast cereal. Instead, women prepared whatever they had gathered the day before. Maybe roasted tubers, dried berries, or leftover meat. Preparing food was not just about filling stomachs. It was about conserving energy for the long day ahead. As children wake up, she multitasks. One eye on the fire, one hand crushing seeds with a stone, and another ear listening for her youngest child's cry. In modern life, we call it juggling tasks. Back then, it was just life. And here's something surprising. Mornings were also a time for planning. Caveman groups weren't chaotic. They were organized. Women often decided when and where to forage, which paths to take, and who would stay behind with the children. These choices shaped survival. A wrong decision could mean wasted energy or even danger from wild animals. Imagine it. While the men might prepare their spears for a hunt, women mapped out the real schedule for the day. Which roots were ripe? Which berries were in season? Where was water safe to collect? Their knowledge wasn't random. It came from years of experience, passed down like a mental map of the land. When we compare it to today, it feels strangely familiar. Don't we still start our mornings with routines, with plans, with family needs? The difference is, back then, a small mistake could cost lives. So every morning, caveman women turned ordinary routines into the most important survival tasks of the day. If you asked most people to picture caveman life, they'd probably imagine a dramatic hunt, men with spears chasing a woolly mammoth across the icy plains. It's exciting, cinematic, and heroic. But here's the truth. Hunting was rare, risky, and often unsuccessful. Most of the real calories that kept families alive came not from mammoths, but from women's hands. Day after day, caveman women walked, miles in search of roots, berries, nuts, seeds, and small game. Foraging may sound simple, but it required deep knowledge of the environment. Which berries were edible, which ones were poisonous, which roots stored energy through the winter, which mushrooms could heal and which could kill. This wasn't guesswork. It was science learned through generations of careful trial and error. And here's the shocking part. Studies of modern, hunter-gatherer societies show that up to 70% of the diet came from gathered food, not hunting. In other words, women's work was the real foundation of survival. Picture it. Our cave woman kneels on the ground, digging with a sharpened stick to pull up tubers. Her hands are calloused, her back bent. She's not just picking plants, and she's fueling her family for days. Later, she might climb a tree for wild fruits, carrying her child on her hip. Another woman gathers nuts, cracking them open with stones. Together, they share the load, often working in groups for safety. But food gathering wasn't only about calories. It was also about timing. If you picked berries too early, they weren't edible. If you dug roots too late, they lost nutrients. Women carried a mental calendar of the landscape, knowing exactly when each food source would be ready. This knowledge was the tribe's greatest survival tool. Compare it to today. We stroll into a grocery store and grab whatever we want without a second thought. For caveman women, shopping meant trekking through wild terrain, sometimes under the threat of predators. A rustle in the grass might mean a rabbit or a snake. A sudden roar in the distance meant lions were nearby. Gathering food wasn't a peaceful stroll. It was a calculated risk. And it wasn't just plants. Women often trapped small animals, caught fish with simple tools, or even scavenged leftover meat from hunts. These contributions added valuable protein. Imagine our cave woman using a woven basket she made herself, carefully balancing berries and roots while also keeping her toddler from wandering too close to danger. Survival demanded multitasking every single step of the way. There's another layer here. Cooperation. Foraging wasn't a solo act. Women worked in teams, teaching younger girls what to eat, warning children about dangers, and making sure the group stayed together. This social bond wasn't just practical. It built trust, friendships, and community. And if you really think about it, isn't this similar to how modern life works? We may not be digging roots anymore, but the idea of teamwork, planning, meals, and providing for family hasn't changed much. The methods are different, but the heart of it, survival through daily effort, remains the same. So when we look back at caveman women, we shouldn't see them as background characters. While men did the exciting hunting, we should see them for what they truly were: expert gatherers, scientists of the natural world, and the steady providers who made sure everyone had enough to eat. Without them, those heroic mammoth hunts wouldn't have mattered at all, because most days it was berries and roots that filled empty stomachs, not spears and blood. When we think of invention in the Stone Age, our minds usually jump to men shaping spears or striking flint to make fire. But here's the truth that rarely gets told. Women were also creators, innovators, and everyday engineers. After gathering food, caveman women didn't just sit around. They worked with their hands constantly, crafting the tools and technology that made daily survival possible. Take baskets, for example. To us, a woven basket might seem ordinary, but to a prehistoric woman it was a life-changing invention. With baskets, she could carry twice as much food, protect delicate berries, and even haul firewood. Without them, foraging would have been limited to what could fit in two hands. Then there were stone scrapers and grinding tools. Our cave woman used heavy stones to crush seeds into flour-like powder, or sharpened flakes to cut roots. These tools weren't flashy like spears, but they were the backbone of survival meals. And don't forget clothing. While men might bring home animal hides, it was often women who cleaned, softened, and stitched them into wearable protection. Imagine trying to survive harsh winters without warm furs. Every stitch, every tie of sinew thread, was another step in human adaptation to the cold. But here's something even more fascinating. Many archaeologists believe women may have been behind some of humanity's earliest technological systems. Think about weaving fibers into ropes, nets, and mats. These weren't just household chores, they were engineering marvels. Nets meant catching fish in larger numbers. Ropes meant dragging heavy loads. Mats meant comfort, protection, and cleaner living spaces. Our cave woman wasn't just a gatherer. She was also a designer. Her hands shaped the tools that shaped the future. And yet, because these items were made of plant fibers, wood, and hides, they rarely survived in the archaeological record. That's why for so long history gave credit only to stone and bone, tools often associated with men. But absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. Just because plant fiber baskets rotted away doesn't mean they didn't exist. In fact, the survival of humans in so many environments, from freezing tundra to tropical forests, strongly suggests women's innovations in clothing, carrying tools, and storage. Let's compare it to today. We don't think twice about Tupperware backpacks or winter coats. But in the Stone Age, those kinds of inventions meant the difference between life and death. Every time a woman wove a basket, stitched clothing, or shaped a stone scraper, she was engineering survival, and she didn't keep these skills to herself. Women taught daughters, nieces, and younger girls, turning knowledge into legacy. Each generation built upon the last, improving designs, testing new methods, and adapting to new environments. That's not just helping around camp. That's innovation, pure and simple. So while men's spears may have made the headlines of prehistory, it was women's quieter, everyday technologies that kept the species moving forward. Fire may have given us warmth, but baskets, clothing, and tools gave us stability. And it was often women who made them. Survival wasn't just about finding food or making tools. It was also about ensuring the next generation knew how to survive. And in the Stone Age, this responsibility fell heavily on women. Our cave woman's day didn't pause once she returned from gathering food or crafting tools. Children needed constant attention. Babies had to be fed, toddlers watched, and older children taught. Without this care, no tribe could survive beyond a single generation. Caring for children in prehistoric times was far more intense than today. There were no cribs, strollers, or babysitters. Infants were carried everywhere, slung in animal hides, strapped against the body while mothers worked. This constant closeness wasn't just practical, it was survival. A crying baby left unattended could attract predators. Feeding children was a round-the-clock task. Nursing could last up to 3 or 4 years, providing both nutrition and immunity. Imagine the energy demand on a woman's body, balancing breastfeeding while also gathering, cooking, and crafting. But child-rearing wasn't only physical, it was deeply educational. Women were the first teachers. Around the fire or during walks in the forest, they taught children which plants were safe to eat, how to crack nuts, how to watch animal tracks, and how to stay safe. Knowledge wasn't written down, it was lived and spoken. Oral teaching was the schoolroom and women were the professors. Even playtime had purpose. When children imitated grinding seeds with small stones or pretended to forage, they were rehearsing real-life survival skills. Older girls often followed mothers on foraging trips, learning by watching and doing. Boys, too, benefited from early training before specializing in hunting or other roles as they grew. And there was storytelling. At night, as the fire flickered, women told tales, myths, warnings, lessons. These weren't just bedtime stories. They carried the tribe's memory, explaining why certain rivers were dangerous, which seasons brought storms, and why cooperation was necessary. In a world without books, women's words were the library. Childcare was also communal. Other women often stepped in to help, whether sisters, grandmothers, or aunts. This shared responsibility lightened the burden and gave children a network of role models. Anthropologists call this alloparenting, a system where many adults contribute to raising children. This may be one of humanity's greatest strengths, setting us apart from other animals. Think about it. A child raised by many hands absorbed not just survival skills but also social skills, how to share, how to cooperate, how to work in groups. These lessons shaped the very foundation of human society. So when we imagine caveman women only as gatherers or caretakers, we miss the bigger truth. They were guardians of the future. Their arms carried infants, their voices carried stories, and their knowledge carried forward the entire species. Without this teaching, the next generation wouldn't have survived long enough to improve tools, expand territories, or create culture. Every scientist, artist, and innovator in human history traces back to mothers and caregivers who passed down the basics of survival. In other words, child-rearing wasn't just about babysitting. It was civilization itself, taught one child at a time. When we picture caveman life, it's easy to imagine individuals, the lone hunter, the mother with her children, the storyteller by the fire. But humans are social creatures, and prehistoric. Survival depended on community. Women were at the very heart of this system. Our cave woman wasn't isolated. Her daily work tied her into a web of relationships, with sisters, daughters, mothers, and neighbors in the group. These connections were more than emotional support. They were survival strategies. Food gathering, for example, was rarely done alone. Women often foraged in groups, sharing knowledge and looking out for danger together. If one woman found a tree heavy with fruit, the bounty was shared. This created bonds of trust and fairness that held the group together. Inside the camp, women's voices carried weight. Decisions about when to move, where to set up shelter, or how to divide resources often involved women's input. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies like the Hadza in Tanzania find that decision-making is surprisingly democratic, with both men and women contributing. It's likely prehistoric communities worked in much the same way. Beyond food and shelter, women also played roles as healers and keepers of knowledge. They knew which plants could ease childbirth pain, which herbs reduced fevers, and which leaves soothed wounds. In a world without pharmacies, this knowledge was life-saving. Imagine our cave woman gathering not just berries to eat, but leaves to grind into a paste for her child's rash. In these moments, she wasn't just a mother, she was a doctor. Women also shaped social life through rituals and traditions. Around the fire, songs and dances often involved the whole group, led by both men and women. Some cave art even suggests female involvement in spiritual or ceremonial practices. Far from being silent background figures, women were active participants in culture. And don't forget conflict resolution. Life in small groups meant disagreements were inevitable. Who got the best cut of meat? Who failed to share during a hunt? Women, often the glue of the community, played a role in smoothing tensions. Their ability to cooperate and mediate helped prevent small disputes from turning into dangerous fractures. Now compare this to modern life. Even today, women often form the backbone of social networks, organizing, mediating, and keeping families and communities connected. The roots of this role stretch deep into prehistory. So while caveman men may have taken the spotlight in myths and stories about hunting, women quietly held communities together. They weren't just gatherers and mothers. They were leaders, healers, teachers, and peacemakers. Without these social roles, prehistoric life would have collapsed into chaos. Cooperation was humanity's greatest advantage over stronger predators, and women were central to maintaining that cooperation every single day. As the sun dipped low and the shadows grew long, the rhythm of prehistoric life shifted. Hunting parties returned, women gathered back at camp, and fires flickered to life. For our cave woman, evening was not a time to rest. It was simply another chapter in the day's survival story. The first task was food preparation. Roots and tubers collected during the day had to be roasted. Nuts were cracked open. Meat, if available, was cooked over the flames. It wasn't glamorous cooking. No spices, no recipes. But it required skill. Fire had to be managed carefully, embers shifted just right, and food cooked long enough to be safe, but not wasted. Every calorie counted. After meals came repair, work. Clothes needed mending, baskets patched, stone tools sharpened. Imagine sitting by the fire, carefully threading sinew through animal hides, while children played nearby. These tasks may sound repetitive, but they were the backbone of survival. Without regular upkeep, the group couldn't function. Children, still full of energy, listened to stories. Women were often the storytellers, weaving lessons into simple tales. A story about a greedy child might warn against hoarding food. A tale of a clever ancestor might teach the importance of caution near rivers. These stories were entertainment. Yes, but they also encoded survival strategies in ways children could remember. Evenings were also social time. Around the fire, women and men talked, laughed, and shared news of the day. Who spotted fresh animal tracks? Who found new berry patches? This casual exchange of information was the Stone Age version of community planning. And then there were moments of creativity. Some evenings, women decorated clothing with beads, etched designs into bone tools, or experimented with new weaving techniques. These small acts of creativity, repeated across generations, laid the foundation for culture and art. From the outside, all of this might look, well, boring. No dramatic mammoth chases, no epic battles, just cooking, sewing, talking, teaching. But here's the twist. This boring life was the very thing that made us human. Think about it. What really separates humans from animals isn't just strength or hunting skill. It's cooperation, planning, creativity, and storytelling. And most of that happened not during hunts, but in the quieter moments around the fire, moments often led and shaped by women. So yes, the evening, routine may look ordinary, but inside that ordinariness lay the foundation of human culture. By now, the day of our cave woman looks nothing like the Hollywood stereotype. She wasn't a helpless figure waiting by the fire. She was a planner, a provider, a teacher, a healer, and a quiet innovator. Her ordinary daily life built the systems that made survival possible. Yet for centuries her story was erased. Early archaeologists, mostly men, looked at stone tools and assumed men made them. They saw handprints in cave paintings and assumed they belonged to boys. They found needles and thread and dismissed them as trivial. Why? Because they couldn't. Imagine women as central to human survival. But modern research tells a different story. From DNA evidence to ethnographic studies of hunter-gatherer tribes, one truth shines through. Women weren't side characters in prehistory. They were key players. They carried the majority of the daily workload that kept groups alive. Their knowledge of plants, water, medicine, and environment was encyclopedic. Their cooperation networks functioned like the first human internet. Their creativity sparked the beginnings of art, clothing, and science. And perhaps most importantly, they shaped the next generation. Every lesson taught, every story told, every small demonstration of how to prepare food or mend tools was an act of cultural transmission. Without that knowledge transfer, humanity could not have advanced. So why does this matter today? Because when we reduce the past to men hunted, women gathered, we lose sight of the bigger truth. Survival depended on balance. Both men and women played critical roles, but women's contributions were far more complex and intellectually demanding than we once believed. When you imagine a prehistoric woman now, don't see a passive cave dweller. See a multitasking strategist who could read the weather, plan meals weeks ahead, heal the sick, raise children, manage tools, and maintain harmony in her group. She was, in every sense, a leader. And here's the irony. The very things that looked boring, grinding roots, sewing hides, telling stories, were the things that made us human. They were the foundation for agriculture, medicine, cities, and culture itself. Without those boring daily routines, there would be no history to write at all. So the next time someone asks, "What did cave women actually do all day?" you'll know the answer: everything. And if you found this journey into the past eye-opening, make sure to subscribe and stick around. Because history isn't just about kings, warriors, and battles. Sometimes the quietest stories, the overlooked stories, are the ones that matter most. So what caveman women actually did all day wasn't boring at all. It was the very heartbeat of survival. From gathering food and raising children to healing, teaching, and holding communities together, they were the quiet architects of humanity. If this story gave you a new perspective on the past, imagine what else history is hiding. There are countless, forgotten stories waiting to be uncovered, and I'll be sharing them here. So, if you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to subscribe, give this video a like, and share it with someone who loves history as much as you do. Because the more we uncover, the more we realize, and the past is never truly boring.